And welcome to this afternoon's webinar, where today, of course, we are looking at the deals clinic. So this is kind of looking at your deals, the opportunities you're looking at, and running through with you kind of what we think about those opportunities and perhaps how we might be able to kind of tweak and refine and do some perhaps some things that might help be successful. Help me with that. I have, of course, got my colleague here, Andrew Green. Hey, Andrew, how you doing?
Very good, thank you, Paul.
Jolly good, jolly good. So we're in pretty safe hands when we bring Andrew forward. So Andrew was 10 years land director at Taylor Wimpey, so he sort of knows a bit about how to find a piece of land and build the odd house and stuff. So so hopefully we're in pretty safe hands today. What I thought we'd do is just jump straight into the platform. Actually, I've got some slides about how to set up site finding campaigns and how to be successful with all of that. But I thought let's just jump straight in and let's kind of get going with all of this. I had a question that was sent through before today's event, which I will just try and bring up in a second. And for the rest of you that are watching, if you'd like to ask us a question and bring your site forward, then in your control panel, there's a little raise hand button. So if you're on a phone, you need to tap the phone, the face of the phone, and or the screen of the phone rather, and it'll sort of come up with this control panel. If you just raise your hand, that will then let us know up here that we need to kind of get in touch with you, and we'll kind of unmute you and get you to ask your questions to us directly. We'll then answer those sort of using the system and kind of things that we might know about those locations and try to bring this all to life for you. So, and we've got a couple of people that have raised their hands. Before we jump into that, what I wanted to do is just to open up my emails, actually, because I had a particular location that I was asked to have a look at. So this was an email through from a lady called Julie. She found a site online, which was this one. So I'm just going to bring that up into my screen and go back to sharing my screen for a second. So what she sent me through is said, well, actually, this was a site that she'd found down in Truro. It's this one here, sort of Princess Street and Duke Street, which is the one that she particularly thought was interesting, really. This is the sort of nice particulars from the outside. It's kind of quite attractive build. It's actually listed as part of that. You can see that here. It's grade 2 listed building. And this is the brochure for the property that she sent through. And she's thinking kind of class MA, let's convert that to residential. That all looks interesting. Thanks very much. So what I thought I would do is just a little bit to life at the moment, and Andrew will forgive me for the fact that I've got 2 tabs open here, one with Nimbus and one with the test site, which obviously I haven't demonstrated that to people on the previous webinar, obviously, because that would be so naughty, but I did actually. So what I want to do, the reason I've done that is we've got a release coming forward this evening where we've got the new commercial availability going, and we've also got the new use classes going on to the information panel, and kind of a load of kind of new stuff that's going in, which is going to be really, really exciting. I've got a whole new workflow as well. It's going to be absolutely mega, which is kind of why I just sort of cheekily opened it up in the webinar a moment ago. But in essence, the sort of the key thing that's being looked at in effect is, so this is the property here that she sent through, and so what we're looking at is of course this property just here that Julie's thinking about. Now, there are kind of 2 things that are kind of interesting, really, or perhaps a few things that are perhaps interesting. And number one is around values. So first off, does it stack to convert it to residential? Is kind of the first question. So the obvious place to start with that is in the market section of the overlays. So that's going to give me a sort of a quick sense check of what the average sales price is across Truro. I don't know where, sort of know Truro's in Cornwall, but I don't know much about Truro. Some parts of Cornwall are very expensive, some parts are very very deprived, and actually kind of which one is this, I don't know, frankly. So what this does is it shows me that this area is kind of an average sale price of 250. Quick rule of thumb of that, if you have 20% of that, typically kind of new build stuff is about that kind of number. So sort of 300 quid is probably where the sales prices are going to be around this sort of area. I suppose for me, then there's kind of a calculation that I run through in my head that allows me to kind of try to work out what kind of building I'd be able to buy. And typically what that sort of calculation does in my head is it says, well, if I've got a £300 a foot sales value and I want sort of 25% return on cost, I need to knock kind of 20% off that. So that £300 a foot drops down to kind of 240. I've then probably got a conversion cost of somewhere in the order of about £100 a foot. So I've got 140 left. So buildings that are worth about 140 quid a foot are the kind of buildings I can afford to buy in that location. So I've kind of got a rough feel for if this price is above that kind of 140 quid a foot, I'm probably going to struggle to make it stack up. That's kind of the sort of the early parts or the early kind of question I've got. So this is 3,000 square feet. And they're asking 340,000 for it. So actually, £110 a foot, it feels like I should be, broadly speaking, in budget to buy and convert this. There is, of course, however, a slight concern over the fact the property is listed. And so the conversion and the way in which I can convert that building is probably more expensive, I suspect, given it's a listed building in that location. But I suppose the big question that Julie asked me is, can I convert that building under Class MA? And of course, the challenge with that is that Class MA doesn't apply in Article 2.3 land. And that means that actually listed buildings, well, Article 2.3 land and also listed buildings, it doesn't apply in either of those areas, which means that actually this building you can't convert under Class MA, but what you could do is you could submit a full-blown planning application on it, and that doesn't, so the full application doesn't say you won't get the consent in that location. It's clearly in a sort of the town centre. It's clearly a sort of, you know, a sustainable location. It's clearly a settlement. It's clearly sort of a sensible thing to be doing in that location. It's just you're not going to be able to use the PD rights as part of that because the building is listed. Helpfully, it tells you that on the particulars. Within Nimbus, of course, it tells us that as well. So I can go and see the details of the fact that property is listed. I suppose what perhaps is useful with Nimbus is it's going to give me a load of information about the particular property itself. So as we kind of scroll down, then this is explaining to me the reasons why the building was listed back in sort of when it was listed back in wherever it was, 1973, I think it was listed. And so what that allows me to understand is kind of what was the conservation officer thinking about when they listed this building. Kind of an interesting comment I've just noticed is that actually the interior wasn't inspected. So the interior, when you start to submit applications around this building, I suspect they'll send the conservation officer out. They'll kind of then work their way around the building and kind of work out what they like and what they don't like, and try to sort of extend what's covered in the listing. Well, the whole building's covered in the listing, but kind of try to kind of explain the bits they're kind of bothered about as part of that. So we're sort of slightly blind in terms of the interior of the building, but of course the exterior of the building then is kind of explained here in terms of what the conservation officer liked about the building when that building was of course listed. So I think the answer to that is that it kind of looks okay, it kind of looks interesting, and so looking at some of the areas across the building as well. So this is the rates assessment for that building in effect. And what it's showing me, and sort of the thing that I think is kind of interesting, is that it's sort of showing me what sort of the breakdown of the values of the space across the building in effect. And I kind of use this quite a lot when you start looking at things like shops with uppers, or looking at the conversion of the rear part of retail units, things like that. It's sort of seeing, well, actually, where do we see these numbers that are quite low? In that kind of calculation that I quickly ran through at the start, saying, well, it's £300 a foot sales values. I want to have 25% return on cost, so I knock 20% off the GDV, and then I look at a conversion cost, and then say from there, what kind of buildings can I buy at 140 quid a foot? Well, what that's really saying, so the rate assessment by definition is what the district valuer thought the rent was back in 2015, which means that the district valuer was saying the rent was about 7 quid at that time. So it's probably more like 8 or 9. And actually we'll look at the Class MA strategy at some point today, I'm sure, to see other buildings that perhaps would convert in this area as opposed to this one. And really, I suppose that's useful to understand, well, how is the value, that 340 grand or whatever it is they're asking for the building, which bits of the building does it attribute to? Because if we're looking at an out-and-out retail location, you're going to find the zone A at the front of the retail is much more valuable than the bits at the back and the bits above it and this sort of thing. And therefore, which bits can I carve off, and what should I be leaving behind as the kind of a small kiosk or retail unit at the front that faces out onto the high street? So I think the answer that I've got here is, I think financially it probably, broadly speaking, stacks up. Slightly nervous about the fact it's listed in terms of the conversion costs. So probably slightly higher conversion costs, which might make it all a bit marginal. But in essence, it's, broadly speaking, maybe interesting, I suspect, is about as far as I would go, frankly. Be a nice scheme, I think, kind of nice. It's a nice building to convert to resi. What are your thoughts, Andrew? Is there anything you kind of want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think just trying to think of maybe some other uses, but I've just done a few little street views and things of the building, and I just think it does lend itself quite nicely to residential. And I think the fact that the listed details there, refer to all these details on the outside. I imagine you've probably got some period features inside, which they'll probably turn around and say we want to keep those as well, but they probably make nice features as a residential property. The beauty of that is then actually you'd probably then be saying to the agent, look, it's not going to convert under permitted development rights. There's more risk involved, therefore we won't be able to pay as much. And I think there's a discussion around it, and I think then it'll be a case of who's willing to take a bit of a view on the risk to get planning to switch to a different use, or alternatively you just end up keeping it as an investment. But it doesn't really lend itself to retail, because you don't think it's got that little narrow doorway and everything, so it's right. I think it's either going to be office or residential if you can get away with either one.
I think the building itself would worry me slightly. There's clearly, you can see down here, there's going to be a leaking drain pipe, and that's been leaking for a while clearly. And I think the building itself and the way, the stonework and this sort of stuff, it doesn't look like a cheap building to kind of improve or to replace the brickwork on the outside. It feels like it's some kind of local stone that you're buying locally, and it sort of feels like it's an expensive thing with a valley gutter roof and this sort of stuff. It doesn't feel like a particularly cheap conversion to me, that I don't think. But and I think that's kind of where it's all a bit marginal in my head, in the fact that when you sort of start to get to the point of truly speaking, what is this going to cost me to convert? I sort of fear that the QS is going to have a bit of a field day in terms of the costs they're going to put into that. So I think I'm slightly nervous about kind of where that might end up actually.
Yeah, I think there's. Well, I think we'll be able to demonstrate there's probably easier opportunities to go at.
Yeah, in fact, let's just do that. Actually, let's have a little look at that. So let's just have a little play. If it's Class MA we're after, then sort of the obvious thing with that is the Class MA strategy, isn't it? So what this is showing me then is kind of which of the buildings across Truro that are in Class E use that then are not part of that Article 2.3 land, that aren't listed, and then where that calculation that looks at the value of the completed scheme versus the value of what's currently there and sensible conversion costs, kind of where do those values sit, and then what kind of return on cost can we expect? And sort of then it sort of color codes it as well. So let's have a look at something like this down here. Sort of perhaps looks interesting. So this is a little tyre garage, isn't it? Yeah, there's a tyre centre there. So that's sort of saying that tyre centre there, which is obviously entirely surrounded by residential. So this kind of Class MA strategy looks at the residential feel to the property and kind of only highlights if there is that residential feel to it. What it's saying is, yes, it's agreeing with me here, sort of £300 a foot sales value. So there's my sort of GDV, 3,762 square feet. That's from the rates assessment. £300 a foot sales value, £100 a foot to convert it. And it's then saying that the rates assessment for this building is 615. So a sensible rental level for that building would be about 850. And then it's saying if we paid 7% net for it, then that would then in effect equate to paying 430 grand to buy it. Net initial yield of 7%, 850 a foot, which is £115 a foot. The conversion would be £100 a foot, so kind of 2/3 of new build cost, 376,000 rather, and it'd be worth 1.12 based on the £300 a foot exit value at that point, which then equates to 320 grand worth of profit, which is a 40% return on cost in effect. And actually, for that sort of scheme, you might do a bit more than that. You might kind of use your PD rights to kind of assume a conversion, but actually you might do a bit more with that. You might do something kind of more comprehensive on a kind of resubmission once you kind of prove the principle of residential in that location. So quite
yeah,
like that opportunity actually.
Absolutely agree with that.
Not a bad one.
If you pursue obviously your PD rights, get your prior approval, then absolutely look at planning application. Yes, converting that building gets your resi on there, but there's so much more potential on that site. That then, like I say, work with an architect to draw up a scheme which is a bit bigger or something, and get a bit more on there, and just intensify that use even further.
And that feels like a rather easier scheme, I think, than the one in the centre of town, to be honest. It's pretty well connected, isn't it? It's kind of, you know, the bus stop outside the front there. It's pretty high profile. The sailboard on the outside is going to get seen quite a lot, isn't it, by the outside the road out there. So I think it's kind of probably some easier wins really around Troy. Some stuff actually down here that's kind of got 60% return on cost. Actually kind of looks like a big number, doesn't it? So 11 square foot retail unit that's there. So it's kind of part of the beauty of Class MA, isn't it? Is that you can change the use of the ground floor too. So that looks to me like there's probably some uppers as well, which might be interesting as part of that. Let's jump down into there. So yeah, there's some upper parts there, sort of first floor storage that's kind of very, very low value. And then in the neighbouring ones at 14A, there's a whole chunk at first floor as well. It's sort of 75p a foot. So it's kind of whether you would perhaps retain some of that front part. That's kind of what I was saying a moment ago. Kind of the Zone A rents at the front of those buildings are kind of quite high. Sort of, well, it's not high. 15 quid a foot is a pretty low Zone A rent, frankly. But when you compare that to a sales value of 300 quid a foot, you know, that space alone is probably 18, 19 quid a foot Zone A, 20 quid a foot, which means it's in itself it's probably worth 250 a foot. So converting that to achieve a 300 pound a foot sale value is kind of pointless. But of course, the area at the back, which is kind of this sort of 150 a foot, 350, and the area above it, 75 pence for your rate assessments, so £1 a foot kind of level on rental terms, you're paying £10-12 a foot to buy the space, then it converts beautifully, thanks. It stacks up really nicely. So that Class MA is looking at converting the whole lot, but you can just take parts of it rather than the whole lot as part of that. And actually, I suspect you might be in a conservation area as part of this.
As I say,
and of course,
a reminder for you, this isn't a conservation area, so it would be a...
Yeah, so the Class MA you can still do in a conservation area, but you have to have an impact assessment as part of that. So of course, if you're keeping a retail kiosk, or sort of small unit at the front to convert the area at the back, then of course that's where it can be really quite beneficial, because you can now do this stuff where you couldn't do Class M, which would convert the space at the back of the retail unit to residential. Historically, you could now do that under Class MA in conservation areas. It's kind of one of the things that Ranjan Bhattacharya was talking about, kind of some of these 10 strategies he talked about earlier on today, was all about with the new Class MA, you can do it in conservation areas, and the old Class M, you couldn't. So it kind of opens up an opportunity for you going forward, in effect. So I feel like I've dwelled quite a long time on that. So should we jump into, there's kind of a few people with their hands up. So should we jump back into there and see if we can bring some people up? I think Patsy was first, wasn't she? So Patsy Richardson, we'll just see if we can bring you up. Just asking you to unmute yourself if I could, Patsy. Hi, Patsy.
But not intentionally put my hand up, sorry.
Don't panic. We'll put your hand down for you. Let me just try and do that, and then we will see if we can get David on. So David Terrison, I think. We'll see if we can get David to unmute himself.
I've just
Hi,
done
David.
that. Can you hear me? Hi.
Yes, we can. Yes, yep. Did you put your hand up on purpose, or was that?
Yeah, I've got quite an interesting site, I think. Could I give the postcode?
Please, yeah, have you got a postcode? Yeah, please.
It's SK16.
So SK16, yep.
4TH.
4TH, yeah. King Street, Dukinfield, is that right?
Yes, so it's Greater Manchester. It's on the east side of Manchester, and it's the title is not registered. It's a church on over 1 acre of land, and I've offered on a church before that had planning for 9 apartments, and it's only slightly smaller, and the apartments were like 150-1,500 square feet. They were large apartments, 2 beds, all of them. So I would like to convert the church, but also do a scheme, hopefully an apartment block, because I've got across the road, slightly north, there's an apartment block to sort of maximize the GDP. So having convert the church and at the same time develop the land, and it's good because you can see the church is on the edge of this piece of land.
Right, yeah.
I've had actually an offer accepted at 265,000.
Yeah,
The
sure.
only thing is a sloping side, which is not ideal. But I was just wanted to have your thoughts on the likelihood of planning, because they're pushing me to sort of buy, to put in basically without subject to planning unconditionally, and I'm just debating on whether it's worth doing. I'd
Yeah,
get rid
yeah.
of the hole, and I'd demolish the hole and just sort of
That's this here,
hopefully
yeah.
have a road in the middle, and then
Yeah.
on either side have semis or detached houses, or ideally a big apartment block at the back and parking at the front, something like that.
Yeah, sure.
I just want to have your thoughts on it, on the likelihood of getting that
Well,
conversion, and that
the-
change of views
yeah,
on the church and planning on the land.
yeah, sure.
Also, the edge of the land is quite it's a rectangle or square. So that strip of land going into it doesn't belong to the church, as you can see. Yeah, you can see that on the map there.
yeah.
Anyway, I'll let you speak.
Yeah, so I
Thank you.
suppose there's I suppose some obvious stuff that I'll say, and it'll be obvious. So apologies if it's really obvious. But of course, the church is listed,
Yeah.
which means that the buildings within the title of that church obviously will be listed as part of that. So they'll kind of I forgot what the thing is, but it's kind of within the church listed building. Those the church list is a thing, isn't it? So sort of just knocking the sort of the church hall down may not be quite as simple as it perhaps might feel. And of course, that also means that
Okay.
the sort of
There's no TPO. Apparently, there's no TPO.
Yeah, well, there's
on the trees.
There may not be any TPOs on the trees, but of course, those trees are then protected as part of the listing of the building though as well. So they'll be kind of,
Okay.
it'll be quite sensitive in terms of what you're doing with the site and how you're doing it and how that affects the setting of that listed building. And that's what will need to be protected as part of it. What are your thoughts, Andrew, in terms of this?
I mean, to be honest, I think what comes to my mind is more around the landowner's motivations in terms of saying that we don't want to deal with a subject to planning application. Like, is that they're just desperate for some cash right now, or they want the certainty on a particular value or something. So then I think I'd be trying to more explore that, because ultimately you are taking a risk by taking this building and then pursuing a change of use on it. And why should they get all that value up front when you're going to take that risk and you might end up with something that isn't going to be worth that much at the end of the day? So I think trying to understand a bit more around the landowner and maybe why they want what they do, and is there a sort of compromise around that deal? And someone suggested here about a JV arrangement. I think I would, by the sounds of it, just by trying to sort of second guess, if they're just desperate to sort of say no, just give us a value and walk away, I think is they probably just want their value and sort of don't want any risk themselves. But then I'd almost say, well, look, yeah, it's not worth what I've offered unless we can get the planning. So we've got to work together as to, if you want the best value, you've got to then wait for me to get planning. If you want a guaranteed figure, then we've got to talk about a lower figure now and maybe a top up at a later date or something if I'm successful. I think coming around to then the planning aspect, I mean, it is D1. I think then you've got to think around a lot of the D1 uses. You've got to then sort of demonstrate there is no longer a use for that. And I imagine if whoever it is, obviously we can't quite see on Nimbus maps because it's unregistered. But whoever that is, if it is the church, then maybe they've assessed that they no longer need this is their requirement. And then ultimately, then if that's the case, it's fair game. If I think that would be subject to, like I say, a lot of the other details around the trees, around all these other little bits, which obviously you'd have to investigate yourself. But the next point really is then, what are the fallbacks? What are your other alternative uses? Obviously D1, you could then look at creches and things like that, that are community halls. What's the value if you could get it as a creche? What's the value as a community hall or something? Is there a need there? Because ultimately that's going to give you a bit of a backstop. in terms of what that value is. So if they're saying, well, look, we want, I think you said it was 265 or something you agreed, and and they say, look, we want at least 250. Well, you could say, well, look, right now under its current use, the alternatives are nursery, and here's a requirement I've got for nursery. Or we could do a search in Nimbus for nurseries, D1 applications, and find those, and therefore we'd get a bit of a feel for what we could get for that, and say, well, look, nurseries are going, and it would be worth 150,000 as a nursery, and therefore, look, I'm looking to try and get even more value on top of that, but I've got to then be rewarded for that, for taking that risk. So I think they're the sort of first things that's come to mind. I think, having a look at the planning.
Andrew, we've got our usual kind of challenge here, Andrew. With Andrew and I have one core thing we disagree on. There's only one thing we ever disagree on, and it's this. And that, David, you've provoked us into that discussion, unfortunately. So this thing that we don't agree on is basically the fact that if you look at the residential comparables within 250 meters of that church, there are no flats that have sold. So there's no flats whatsoever that have sold within 200 meters of that church. So for me, the worry about that is what's that marketplace for selling those flats on? Kind of what is that sale price? Everything's houses around there. You're going to put some flats into that marketplace because you're not going to break that church up, I suspect, into houses, because it's such a big lump that it's going to be difficult, and it's not really going to kind of be sympathetic. And you're doing that to a listed building, and it sort of doesn't quite feel like the right scheme to me. And then so what that then leads. Sorry, David, go on.
Yeah.
Sorry, David.
Well, I'm not sure, because I read the SLA, and I was council that they're pushing for small dwellings and flats also, not on this postcode. Well, I don't know what search you did, but a little bit further north, there's an apartment block called Lim Place, LYM, and they sell all right.
So the thing this is now the 500 meter search in effect. So we're sort of getting quite a long way away in effect. So that's kind of what worries me. You said Lim Place, did you? So I can see if I can find that for you on.
It's 149 King Street. It's on I think 149 King Street, Lim Place.
So where are we?
And there's been some sales in the past 2-3 years. I don't know why it's not coming up here.
So 149 is presumably up here, is it? Yeah, kind of there.
Yeah, a bit more north, a bit more up on the left. It's definitely within 500 meters.
Yeah, so let's just kind of measure that for you. So it's sort of saying Lime Street there, isn't it, down to there? So that is 390 meters, basically. Yeah. So the argument Andrew and I have is that if I can't find a flat that's sold nearby to that property, should I be building a flat scheme in that location? Question mark.
Okay.
With the case of this, maybe. But it's kind of quite hard to find where is that true comparable. When you then start layering on, let me just see whether this makes a difference as well. So this kind of then plots the sort of the neighborhood boundaries, and actually we're kind of within the same neighborhood here in effect. So it's kind of, I wanted to make sure we weren't sort of disappearing across into a sort of a weaker part of town, perhaps further north, something like that. Sort of this area here, they've got a much lower value than over here in effect. So it sort of maybe is my worry is kind of what is the sales value of the flats that are there, and are they the right level? And the other thing that kind of goes to my head as well is this we sort of heard quite a lot from customers recently that sort of funding flats is quite difficult at the moment. This kind of whole COVID issue of, well, we've all been locked up in our homes, and actually if we've been in a flat, then sort of we're just desperate to get out and have a garden somewhere, and therefore houses are doing quite well and flats are not doing so well. And if you haven't got balconies on those flats, then they're quite hard to sell at the moment, and therefore it's quite hard to get funding on them. And so I sort of, with the listed building, with the listed nature of that church, that kind of worries me a little bit as well.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair enough. Right.
You're not going to be put balcony on the front of the listed building.
So you think that there would be a risk that planners would say, "Oh no, you can't do anything with the land. It's just part of the listed building, and then we don't want to touch the trees."
Yeah, I think from what I gather there, you said
Hello?
about the trees. I think there's a definite risk there that it's all part of the setting of the listed building, and therefore you might have an issue there. I think you broke up on your other point around the building.
Sure. I was just looking at the chat. There's kind of there's a few comments there actually. So Elsie has found a flats under offer actually at 195 King Street, which probably is quite close actually. That does kind of make us feel rather more comfortable actually. So that's,
you've got bus stops on that main,
you found,
you've got a main road. Oh,
which
yeah.
road?
Sorry, David.
Sorry, I missed what you said. What
There's
you
a flat under offer, Elsie's saying, at 195 King Street, just up the road from here. So maybe that is okay. Maybe there is kind of evidence of that. We kind of need to check what those rates are, but maybe kind of check out. Right, so I don't know. I think I'm not sure is the answer. I think I'm not sure.
I think I think you need to caveat it. I think with the landowner, I don't think the landowner can say, "Look, give me the full price," and then you take all the risk on the planning. The one thing I would say is that site does then give you access into some quite long rear back gardens. Mm-hmm. So then you are then getting potential to sort of not only are you talking about knocking down that building, but even getting an access in down the side. You could then maybe get access to sort of 2 or 3 of those rear gardens on that eastern edge, where then you might get another unit or 2 in the back of there. So I think there's lots of opportunity with it, but I think there's a lot of risk involved, and therefore I think you got to caveat that in the deal.
Oh, that's right. And
so essentially, I mean, subject to planning or an offer with overage or something would be more suitable, something like that.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think very carefully about what the scheme is in there, because I say that sort of flat scheme. It feels like it's a flat scheme, doesn't it? It feels like it's kind of some sort of central core. I don't think you're not breaking it up vertically, you're breaking it up horizontally, I would think, aren't you? And then what's that marketplace, and how's COVID affected that? And is that the sort of the simplest thing to do? It's a big old lump for not a huge amount of money, so it feels like there should be some opportunity with it. It's just, what is it, and how does it play out?
There's too much, when you start digging, there's too much uncertainty to sort of go for it.
Yeah, exactly.
Basically,
I think you kind of want to try to unlock that. I wonder if you can get off the back there. Can you get is there access off the back there as well? So you can get through there, can you?
There's a random bit of land.
Through the edge, through the curve of Saxon Avenue?
Yes, there's a gap. It's all within that. It's all owned by the council. Yeah, so you can't go from back there, even if it's being used. It's owned. It's in private ownership. It's owned by a company.
Given the values in the area, it might be an appeal to like a housing a housing association or something. Maybe you could look at alternative uses of that as well, in terms of just a full affordable scheme or something, which they might then take the flats, but maybe they'll put some grant in, so you're getting sort of full market values for it rather than affordable values. So
Andrew, I didn't do this, obviously. Didn't do this, but this is the test site. So there's a release tonight where this is all going live tonight. So what was kind of also going through my head is there some sort of commercial use nearby, and kind of what does that look like? So is there an office use that perhaps drives a higher value? I don't know. So that's 12,500 square feet. So it's 27,000 square feet £27,000 for 2,900 square feet. It's like 10 quid a foot, isn't it? So it's not crazy high values for what is kind of reasonably good office space there, I suspect, isn't it? So maybe not. But I thought that kind of could be interesting in terms of, is there perhaps a different use for it?
What you're saying, potentially more better to keep it commercial?
That's what I was wondering. Is it a kind of a commercial use rather than a residential use?
Like a crash or nursery or a.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of an interesting one. Unless in kind of office use or something like that. Is there a kind of a hotel, guest housey kind of use, something like that? Don't know. Not sure. I'm sort of stretching that a bit, to be honest. So,
Yeah, I think the nursery or crash is probably the best option in commercial.
Mill said care home. I'm not sure about care. Care usually is they kind of like to clear a site and start again and sort of build.
So
I'm not sure care is quite the right use.
Agree.
So
doctor surgery. Someone said doctor surgery.
Yeah, sure. It's down to that local requirement, isn't it? Really. I mean, the only trouble with that is it's listed. So I was kind of thinking, well, do you go off onto sort of like the requirement list and have a look at what the commercial requirements are in this part of Manchester and try and tie together anything. Actually, the building that you've got is going to be heavily listed, and it's like, well, are you going to be able to kind of put a Pizza Hut delivery sign on the front of it? Well, you're not. So I don't think it's quite that.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure that because it's listed, I'm not quite sure it's that use, unfortunately. It's a tricky one, I think. Tricky one. Fabulous.
Yeah, it is. Okay. That's what put it through. Put it forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Fabulous. Thank you, David. Right, we'll jump on to the next one. Let's see if we can just jump back in. So I think Chris Kamira was next. Let's see if we can ask you to hi, Chris. We can't hear you yet, Chris, actually. I don't know if you're perhaps just check your microphone. It's saying you're unmuted, so
if not, you can always.
No, I think we're struggling there, aren't we? We'll give you a moment, Chris. Just have a little play and see if you can kind of get yourself sorted out. We'll leave you trying to get that. We'll just we'll jump on. So we've got
He has just posted an address actually.
So is that Chris? Okay. 85 Kew Road. I guess that could be in all sorts of different councils. That's you.
That's in Surrey.
85 Kew Road. Oh, we got you. Brilliant. Hi, Chris. How you doing?
Oh, good. Finally.
So Kew Road in Richmond, is it? Or
Richmond, yes.
Richmond. Cool. Let's jump in there and have a look. I'm still on the test site. Actually, let me just jump back into the live site. So I'm being very naughty, and Andrew's going to frown at me in a second if I'm not careful. So let me just jump into there.
Everyone will have access to it from this evening. So
very shortly, yeah, absolutely.
But,
absolutely.
luckily it is.
So, what's that done? It doesn't seem like it's that again.
Do you want the postcode instead?
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind. That doesn't feel like it's in the right place.
TW9.
Sorry, TW9.
3AH.
3AF. Like that, is it?
H worry.
H.
H.
H. Oh, sorry, H. Cool. Sorry, yeah.
There you go.
There we go. Cool. Brilliant. And it was number 85, was it?
85, yeah.
Yeah, let's just check where we are. 73. Is that the pub on the corner, is it?
Yeah, the pub in the corner.
Oh, pubs. Where do we go with pubs? Well, it says restaurant, actually. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So
the idea is to demolish it and put maybe 4 stories there, apartments.
Yeah, sure. So I think what was kind of immediately worrying me was kind of it's saying it's pub, but actually, so the rate assessment obviously isn't the planning use necessarily, but it's a really good indication of what the planning use might be. So it would feel a lot like you might just get away with saying, well, it's nice, isn't it? Oh, it is a restaurant. Yes, that's us. Yeah. That's fine, isn't it? So it's a restaurant. That's fine. And it's empty, is it? Or
it's empty.
Yeah. So gondola lease was back in 2012. So they've not renewed that then, presumably.
No. And Wellington are willing to sell it.
Yeah, sure. So it's not listed. There is a flood issue with it. That's the only trouble, isn't it? So that might be a problem. Let's just see where the flooding drops in. So It's quite alarming, isn't it? It's all in flood zone 2 and 3, which is slightly alarming, but that doesn't always stop there, does it? That so what kind of would just interest me is whether there's any planning applications around there for residential development in the floodplains. We had an example of this where we were doing a scheme in Hoveton, which is kind of out in East Anglia kind of way, and it was kind of entirely in a flood zone, but actually we were able to get a consent on it because it was okay in that particular council. So my guess is that Richmond are letting people develop in the flood zones, but we just want to kind of prove that it's in flood zone 3 though, isn't it? Which is not ideal. Sorry, Chris.
Yeah, there's an apartment scheme not too far away from there, on the other side of the road.
And that's been built recently, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Well, in fact, what we could do is we could do this, couldn't we? We can just sort of see where those planning applications are and just see what sort of applications have gone in. There's one there, isn't it? That looks like it's a residential. Converting existing dwelling into 2 dwellings back in 2016. So if that got existing building consent for it, it would look like that should be okay then, doesn't it, if that's the case? So there's your full application there, apologies. Let me check that I got approved. Got appealed, didn't it, to start with? Appeal was dismissed. So not ideal. Maybe we should see whether that got dismissed because of that, because of the flooding issue. What I'm trying to find is just sort of a planning permission within that flood zone. So this is the planning overlay in effect, and where it's talking about residential applications, it sort of goes red. And so what I'm trying to find is is there a sort of a red spot round here that I can kind of pin my sort of advice on, in effect, of change of use in office there to C3, with extension to the ground greater listed building Q green conservation area. It seems a remarkably clunky website, to be honest, but so that was granted, so that got a consent there. So that perhaps is slightly helpful, isn't it, in terms of that change of use office to resi. They got the new dwellings in the floodplain there.
I'm just having a look at the flood risk assessment on that one, so I'll just see if it just mentions anything quickly on this.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting, isn't it? It's kind of on the the reports there, is it? There's flood risk assessment there. There you go. Yeah.
They basically just said that the existing ground floor level would remain the same,
right,
and therefore requiring preservation of the existing threshold levels. And this was accepted by the EA along with the previously agreed mitigation measures. Please see, and I'm going to go through the whole report. So clearly there's, I wonder if, they're basically saying the finished floor levels of the bedrooms are set no lower than a certain level above the ordnance datum. So essentially, you'll end up having to, as part of any works, work with a flood risk consultant to basically work out what that level is, and then any of your bedrooms have got to be above there. Any new basement doors on the south side of the site to be flood doors, new build walls on the northwest to be constructed as flood walls, so that your build cost is going to be higher. So it's possible. You're just going to have to increase the costs involved, and that may increasing ground levels as well, which is obviously quite costly as well.
There's a chat from Kevin saying it's list is is it listed? So it is listed. I thought I got it wrong, but so it's not listed. I was then just sort of trying to see, well, have I got something wrong here? But it's I don't think it is listed, but it is, that building there is listed next door, which makes me slightly nervous. Just making sure that you can get that sort of so close such to a listed building kind of also would be slightly worrying. So just that kind of that setting, we've had permissions turned down in the past because you're trying to do something over the road from a listed building, and that would then affect the setting of it.
What's making you think a brand new building rather than just converting the existing, just to get more square footage?
I mean,
Yeah.
values, it's pretty strong values around there, I think, isn't it? It'll be punchy old values, I would think. You know, look at this. It's a 785 average sales value, so it'll be new build £1,000 a foot, won't it? Or not quite, nearly £900 a foot or something. Which so every square foot you can get, the better, isn't it? Really.
Well, but then you're going to be paying quite a premium for that building anyway. You know, just thinking, is there the value in obviously knocking it down and then rebuilding a whole new building when it's a pretty decent sized building on that plot?
I would think it would. I think you'd do pretty well. What's the deal with the access down here? Is that do you know what's happening there? Can you block that off? Because that's obviously in your title. Does the title show kind of how that's used? It looks like it's been used for a long time, doesn't it? It looks like it's pretty. Just think that's actually in the title as well. The kind of the road is part of the title. So kind of what's happening with that? I think it's probably pretty established, that use, I think, isn't it? So I don't know whether you're going to stop anyone using that, but
Yeah, so you could simply convert it.
Sorry?
So you could just convert it and maybe add 2 floors at the top if.
Well, that's kind of interesting, isn't it? So the kind of the Class E use, you could convert under MA, I suspect now, can't you? Because it's a restaurant, which means it'd be Class E. So you can convert it to Resi under that. It's not listed, so that's fine. This isn't a flood zone, though, so you couldn't do it. You won't be a Class A MA on it because the flood zone would stop it. So, so it's a full application for it, isn't it? But it's not particularly contentious, is it? It's a I don't think that would be particularly difficult thing, frankly.
Yeah.
It's more about how much more can you get on it, and and how does that affect this? I mean, you'd think you could get a building like that on it, and so you can knock it down and put something like that, or perhaps even something like this on it. So, you know, is that?
I just think, yeah, you know, that's all I'm thinking is, you know, if you to respect the concept, you know, the list of buildings, then it normally means you sort of, you know, using similar materials and everything else and similar design.
Yeah.
Then you're going to be looking at quite an expensive build. You're only going to get to 3 stories. You're already at 2. It's quite a big building already. I think, you know, just look to convert the roof or something on the existing building. Minimizes all your costs. You still get.
You share that risk with the pub company, of course. You say, well, this is the scheme based on conversion and going to the roof space and converting that. We'll try and get a consent to extend it. And of course, values are very strong in the area, and therefore, if I can get that, then I'll pay you an overage based on what I can get. But what it's currently worth is this. And then we'll give you half of the uplift if I can get a consent to knock it down and put, you know, something like this, wrap it round, and off we go. So maybe you can try and get, I certainly work with the pub companies historically, you know, sort of giving an element of overage to them. Meant they were usually kind of quite comfortable with that.
Great stuff. Thanks.
That's the answer, Chris. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Fabulous. Cool. Let's jump back into. So we have Adetunji. I don't know if I said your name correctly there, Adetunji, but I'm just going to. Hi, can you hear us?
Hello.
Adetunji, how you doing?
I'm great, thank you. Good afternoon.
Fabulous.
Yeah, I'm sort of new to Nimbus, and I'm just trying to get my hand around it.
Yeah.
Or I would like for you to please look at a site,
Yep.
which is OL.
The old bell.
9. Pardon?
So the old bell.
OL9.
Oh, sorry.
9W.
Yep. OL9.
9W.
9.
It's a code language.
Is that Oldham?
Yeah.
Lowcroft Crescent.
Yeah.
Let's have a look. And what number was it?
It's close to number 37.
Number
So it's
27.
partially out of 35, I believe.
So it's again, number 27, say?
35.
35. Okay, this one here.
Yeah.
There you go. I see. I
Yes,
see.
yes.
That's interesting. So. Let's have a look. Let's have a look. So, veg property there. What kind of go to my head is,
Yeah.
is it kind of green belt or anything like that? Is there kind of anything is worried about? Presumably you're thinking about something on the side here, are you? Putting a unit to the side of it.
Yes.
Yeah, sure. So that's, I suppose, a pretty usual use of this kind of ordnance and master map effect, is trying to find those little pieces of land where you can kind of almost infill the frontage, which is kind of what you've got there in effect. Andrew, what are your thoughts on that? You're kind of the resi man. Should we? Where do you want to start with this?
Well, I mean, you know, if you click on the road and the little plot of land next to it, it's owned by
that one.
Yeah. So this is
Redrow. Yeah.
Redrow Homes who developed it. Be very surprised they've left this gap here. The little stream at the back.
Okay.
I wonder if this is where the site floods, and therefore that's why there's only 2 houses there.
Doesn't look like it.
Yeah, no, I'm just trying to put the flooding on now as well. It doesn't look like it floods. It just seems really strange that Redrow, whenever they developed this site, didn't seek to put a couple of units in there. You know, so the only thing would then, you know, if I was appraising this site as a big resi developer like Redrow would, you're going to maximise the number of units you can get on there. I don't think it's the kind of location where you want to give a really large garden. That's an abnormally sized garden for a plot. So it looks like they were constrained in some other way. You know, it looks like they've all got this, you know, it seems like all the houses along that back southern edge all have really long gardens, you know, so which, I don't know, there's something suggesting that and well, you can see, yeah, the flood zone is a tiny little bit, isn't there, to the sort of left-hand side, and not much else. So it's just a really strange one why they would leave that. But so the only other things as well, thinking like a big developer, there'd probably be a covenant on there on that plot that maybe restricts building another unit unless they pay some money back to Redrow. That's certainly something which we did a lot. But the only way to do that would be to then download the title and have a look and see. So make sure there's no covenant on there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, like I say, flooding is not an issue. So that would be the only other concern. I mean, someone's just mentioned about trees and TPOs. Yes, maybe there are a load of TPOs on those trees through there. But they don't look, I mean, other than one big one there, but it's just the fact that they all seem quite sort of set back from that little stream. That's the only thing that sort of really stands to, you know, sort of concerns me. But yeah, other than that, I think, to be honest, yeah, you just approach the landowner and say, look, yeah, can we buy a slither of your land? You know, subject to planning, and it's a no-brainer for them. That, you know, that pays for their holidays for the next few years. So, on the face of it, and then all you need to do then is just understand your values. You know, so then ultimately, what are residential values in the area?
So sort of 210 a foot, so it looked okay. It's so that's kind of the average sales price. So you're probably going to get, you know, 20% more than that, so 250 a foot, something like that. I guess you can use the comps here to go and find out what that is. So, just run that by that quickly.
Yeah, I'm just having a look here at. I'm trying to think when these were. So they were done back in 2005. maybe anything that was on there is sort of lapsing anyway, sort of a good 15, 16 years on. But no, that I'd be interested in speaking to Redrow about what they want to do with these little plots of land anyway. You know, there's the 2 plots either side. There's opportunities on there. The only thing with those is then probably part of the open space requirements, probably under the Section 106. You know, a lot of the areas that I developed, a lot of councils basically said, look, at this scale, you need to be providing 20% of the site as public open space, and therefore you wouldn't get any housing on there at a later date. That's the only other thing, really. I think obviously this is the plot is in their ownership, so you just got to check are there any covenants on that title, PPOs. Have a chat with the council and say that was in getting there. You know, the only thing, like I say, that normally restricts the number of units on a development would be highways, and whether then obviously there's a limit of the number of units that you could get off that particular road access. But from what I've just seen on the one that I've on my screen, it doesn't matter there's any access issues either. It's, you know, it's all good size, 5.5 meter size roads. So yeah, I think if, you know, there's obviously something that stopped Redrow in the past. It's worth exploring, you know, to find out what that is. I don't think it'd be expensive to find out. And if it doesn't exist anymore, then I would press on.
So Andrew, how do you find? So Jamil just asked a question. How do you find out if there's a requirement from the council to leave some land empty when Redrow put the planning in? So
you could. I know it's difficult. Whatever it was going to be in 2000. I appreciate. Yeah, you know, my platform seems to have.
I think it's mine's suddenly woken up again now when I switch the screen share off. I think it's something to do with
sharing the screen. But
sharing the screen, yeah.
So it's whether then if we can see whether there's the Redrow application for that particular scheme, then you will then see arguably that they should highlight on their plan where the public open space is as part of that development. And then obviously those areas then I wouldn't bother with.
137 dwellings going over the road there, look. 2019 application for so maths went in 137 units over there.
Yeah, but it's not getting access to there anyway, is it? You know, and then the only other way would be the council. It depends whether the council are maintaining it or not. But typically areas that would be still owned by the developer, they probably are being maintained by a third party, and therefore they're part of the development as open space. If not, the only other reason why the developer would maintain ownership of plots of land like that is for ransom strips. So if for whatever reason Redrow think, well, hold on, if we could cross that stream and get into this plot of land the other side of that stream, then we need an access to get over there. So then they may say, look, you know, we're not interested at all. This is a potential future access to getting across that stream. And it might just be that the cost of getting across that stream is prohibitive in terms of generating a decent land value for the bit of land to the south of that stream or something. Because it's weird, yeah, none of it's in flooding, you know, in a flood zone.
It looks like it's that's the access there. It's like kind of kept some access through to get into this piece of land down here. So we kept this bit back, but
where it says Nicky Driver Trainer, who owns that bit of land there?
This one?
Where it says to the left, so go sort of slightly northwest from where you are.
Oh, there, yeah.
That bit of land there, yeah, that's going to be Redrow as well, isn't it? So I would say, yeah, all the open spaces that are generally owned by the developer. So big Redrows, Persimmons, David Wilson, Taylor Wimpey's, that's the public open space. And what they've done is they've done an agreement with the council to maintain that grass, but the developer still owns the soil underneath. And so, yeah, so like all of these fields here, like I wouldn't bother looking at those. And to be honest, I personally wouldn't probably waste my time trying to contact Redrow on either of these two bits of land. But
that one's good, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I definitely would contact that owner. I think it'd just be worth seeing if there's a covenant on there. I just think my gut feeling there'll be some reason why they didn't put two houses on there, you know, and then it'll just be a case of finding that out. But with it, speaking to the landowner, speaking to the council, you're going to find out straight away whether there's a TP or whether the council say, look, from a highways point of view, it's never going to work or whatever, you know. So yeah, nice little find, to be honest. That's the beauty of sort of going around with a master map and sort of finding these little larger back garden sites.
Yeah, fabulous. Right, well, I'm just conscious of time actually, so let me just jump back into the slides for a second.
Andrew, one sec, if I could ask just a quick question, please.
Sure.
Yeah, go for it.
There was, while I was trying to get my hands on the Nimbus map, a particular day, I was able to kind of flip the map, sort of to see the side of the building or see it rather from an aerial view, but from a different perspective. Now, I couldn't get to do that again. I don't know if there's any particular
so there's like a little button down here that
tab
does the bird's eye just down here in effect that you can then go and see. And sometimes when Google has it, then sometimes you'll find there's like sort of 4 little buttons, that little sort of square of like the 4 little bird's eye integration bit here. There's some of that pops up there when kind of Google has that, or you can use the sort of the link across to Bing. Actually, tend to find Bing's got kind of better coverage of I think some of this stuff actually.
That's the reason. Is it
different? Yeah, is this stuff on the right? You've got it on the right with the arrow and red and white. On your right, it's shown here now, but it doesn't always prop up. No, I think it's on your left. Yeah, that one there.
So this is Bing, you see. So this is the Microsoft version. There is sometimes you get so in effect, Nimbus works off Google Maps, and then kind of the 3 little, so the 4 little squares appear there, and it sort of then will kind of give you the bird's eye view within Nimbus itself and put the ownership on it. But sometimes Google hasn't got it, so we then have this little Bing link here, which then allows you to go and see in Bing in effect, which just gives you a sort of a different base map in effect. It's the Microsoft version rather than the Google version in effect that opens you up in.
So
that makes sense.
Okay.
What we've now established though is the reason why this isn't going to work. There's a massive change in levels. They're essentially sat quite on a hill there. If you go back to Nimbus, Paul.
No, look, yeah.
And if you could do the street view from the road on the left hand side now, and you can see right across the hills, and yeah, that's the reason why they're all set back from that stream, and that's the reason why there's no flooding. Is there's a big change in.
It drops off down, I think. There you go. Yeah.
I think
drops off down the side, isn't it? That's sorry. So it drops off down there basically.
So I think I mean, it might be doable. It's very expensive. I just think that's probably why they haven't, they didn't factor that in when they did it. The values in this area, what we're at 150, somewhere around there. It's 160.
Yeah.
So I think, when you start factoring in trying to sort of prop up a building, building it on a quite a steep slope, then I think you're going to struggle to make it stack up.
You often find that on the master map, actually, kind of this sort of green sort of bit here often kind of alerts to that sort of stuff. You can also kind of find levels when you sort of look at the front of the building. So when you sort of look at the sort of damp-proof course and stuff at the front, you can often kind of see sort of where the brickwork changes. Let's find it now. You watch. Oh, let's find. I should be able to sort of see something there, shouldn't I? We can sort of see it there, can't you? You can sort of see the retaining wall going through there, but you sort of can get a bit of an eye for that sort of the levels. You can see it's kind of all sloping down, can't you? Sort of see how it's sort of falling off a cliff down there, isn't it?
Yeah, I suspect, like I say, that the drive out to meet the landowner, you probably would have then realised at that stage what it is. But
yeah.
I
did that once on a pub in Portsmouth. I drove all the way to Portsmouth to go and look at a pub, and then realised it was like this, a cliff, which was slightly painful. But that was why I brought LiDAR into some of the calculations to make sure that you get those levels issues sorted out. So, and once bitten, twice shy. Fabulous. Well, I think that's covered all of the questions that were in the chat, albeit there is, I think given it's 5:05, I think that's probably all we have time for, I'm afraid. So let me just jump back into my slides just briefly, just to let you all know there is a new Class MA strategy that's, apologies, I've now got the wrong slide. Let me just jump through back into the slides a second. We have a new Class MA strategy that's been launched literally this week, actually. And what that Class MA strategy does is it kind of helps find opportunities for the new Class E, conversions into residential. So in essence, it picks out the Class E use. It then looks at the floor space and says, is that smaller than the maximum that the new Class MA conversions of the permitted development rights, or prior approvals rather, that Class MA allows you to do now. Those are then it filters it based on the size, so it's smaller than 1,500 square meters, adds a residential field to that location, then it checks whether the property is listed or it's an Article 2.3 land and removes all of that stuff from the search. It then categorizes the value and the kind of the return on cost that you're going to make from those properties, and it builds in a sort of a regional variation on the yields and the rents that apply to these commercial buildings and the build costs on top of that. And it then kind of quite usefully pops this little kind of calculation down here to give you a sort of an appraisal for each of those buildings too. So it's kind of checked the planning behind the scenes should work. It's kind of checking that the building should fall within the new Class MA. It's then running a sort of slide rule across it to say, should it convert? Do those numbers kind of stack up to convert as well? And then plots all that in a map for you. And if anybody's interested in that, there is a, so the Class MA comes out on the 1st of August. We've got a few days left on that. And until that comes out, we've actually got an introductory offer that applying to this particular strategy, which is that the usual price is £600 for the year, but actually get it for £500 at the moment if you do it before the 1st of August. If anybody's interested in that, we have a link that I can paste into the chat for you to get yourself sorted out on that. And we have the final thing we also have is we have a commercial deals clinic booked in for next week. We've got Ranjan Bhattacharya coming on as well. So Ranjan will be taking your place, Andrew, for next week. If you would like to join us on that, we'll pop the details of that in the chat as well, which is my next job. Give me 2 seconds while I do that. I'm very much multitasking here and struggling with that multitasking, as you can all see. Give me a second while I open that back up again, which is that one. There we go. So if anyone would like to look at signing up for the Elite Plus platform, or indeed joining our commercial deals clinic, then I'm going to pop that into the chat now for everybody who would like to use that. And then finally, we have, if anybody would like to have a one-to-one demonstration of our Elite platform, then of course we can also offer that for you as well. So what I will just do is also just launch a quick poll to see if you would like to run through that. So if you'd like a 14-day free trial of the Elite platform, that first question is for you. If you'd like a one-to-one demonstration of the Elite platform, that second question is for you. And actually, if you'd like to attend our next webinar, which is actually before the deals clinic, then that third question is for you. So that's at 2 o'clock on Wednesday the 3rd too. Hopefully all that's been useful. We've covered off the questions as we go. I'll just leave that poll running for a moment just to let people just kind of get themselves sorted out. If they want to pick up any of that, then that's all there for you.
I think we've covered everything, all the other ones.
I believe so. So really all that's left for me to do firstly is to thank you, Andrew, for your support today and for guiding us through today. It's been much appreciated.
No problem, thank you.
Fabulous. And then finally, thank you to you for watching today. It's been good fun. It's been kind of challenging and interesting all the way through. So I've been Paul Davis. We've been Nimbus Maps, and we'll look forward to seeing you again soon. All the best. Bye for now.